Good evening. And today I would like to introduce a guest who I'm interviewing. And this is a Dutch historian, Ud van de Staaij. And I hope I pronounced your name
Yes,
adequately.
absolutely. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Now, in this evening's discussion, we are probing a very interesting character. This is a Charles-Henri-Gabriel Montandon who uh, is quite interesting because of the level of his mysterious nature. He has been hard individual to track, not only genealogically but historically. Sources related to him do exist, however, they are scattered, and it requires a lot of archaeology, so to speak. But I would like to present my first question and to you, and that is, let to begin. Describe the main themes and areas of inquiry that shaped your career in historical research, and what can you tell us about your background?
Absolutely. Now, I've studied Eastern European history at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. So I've finished this with a MA thesis in 1985. And the thesis was about the influences of American pragmatist ideas on Soviet educational policies in the 1920s. So that originally was my specialty. So my specialty was Bolshevik history. So how I came to Russian history, that's one big, what is a trail of coincidences. So at the time I was studying, I had a friend, we both were driving motorbikes, and we had the plan of making a trip to the Soviet Union. And so that was one. And the second was that we thought, now it would be nice to study some Russian as preparation for this trip. So the trip never took place. Russian was much more difficult to learn than we thought. So it took us ourselves quite some time to study Russian, and we also had a delay in our studies. And then we were able to catch up with the delay by making thesis on Russian history. So then I ended in Russian history, which was never my plan, and I didn't go to Russia or Soviet Union, which was my plan. So that's just a trace of coincidences. Then when I finished my studies, it was very difficult to find a job as a historian. So I've been working as a freelance teacher for some 6 years. That means that at that time I developed my own courses in Russian history. So it was Russian history, the 19th and the 20th centuries. I was helped at the time because a month after I finished my studies, Gorbachev came to power. Nobody had expected it, so everybody was asking what is going on in Soviet Union, and then suddenly my expertise was much in demand. So I thought I could earn a living on it. That was not possible. So I've been teaching Russian history for about 5 years, all kinds of adult education. But then I decided to change my career. So I made a career in HR, human resource management and consultancy. So I've been earning my money for 35 years in human resources. But besides that, I've continuously researched Russian history. And then my main interests were Soviet daily life and Soviet popular culture. So I've been writing about Stalinist musicals, for instance, music, the Russian war songs of the beginning of the war, but also about emancipation of women. So all kinds of small or popular historical topics I've been writing about. So I've been publishing in popular historical magazines, so not academic magazines. I've been doing that regularly for about, I think, 25 years. And then at the end of my career, then I stumbled upon a correspondence of a person who had been working for Dutch Mennonite organizations, helping Mennonites in Ukraine during the famine of 1922 and 23. So that was Rijn Willink, and from this correspondence, I made a dissertation. So 2 years ago, I got my PhD in history. at least formally, as religion and theology, because it was concerned Mennonite history, but I consider myself always as a historian. So then I wrote my PhD, and that still has no relation to Montandon, although in a little way, because then suddenly I was an expert on Ukrainian history, because the head was in Ukraine. And and I also thought that Ukraine would be an interesting field of research. Then after the breaking out of the full-scale invasion of our Russian friends, then we decided to organize a conference about the history of the relations between the Netherlands and Ukraine. And because I was one of the organizers of this, and I was at Groningen University, I also had to give an introduction. And then I made an outline of the relations between the Netherlands and Ukraine. And in this outline, I was investigating the trade relations between the Netherlands, as we call it, and Ukraine, as we call it. I say as we call it because the Netherlands has changed borders and its state, so to say, just like Ukraine. So in these two, changing territories, the relation between these two changing territories now is my research topic. So I intend to write some articles about the development of Dutch sea trade in the Black Sea. And during this research, I came across Charles-Henri Montandon. So I think
And you did pronounce it correctly, by the way, which is a rarity. Now, I generally am pronouncing it on this channel the American way. However, I know that a lot of Americans are listening to this and watching the channel. However, I try to integrate. You hit it right on the nail. So, but incidentally, we do share a little bit of common history in that when I was in university, I studied French and Russian languages, and perestroika was happening. It was very in the news, so to speak. And in 1990, my first trip abroad was to the Soviet Union, and we went to the three large cities of Leningrad, Kiev, and Moscow. So this was happening exactly when Gorbachev was elected president, the first president. So this should bring some memories back for you too. And there is another interesting tie over with this Montandon family. Now, these people, all the Montandons are sharing a single common ancestor. So they're all cousins, they're all related. And one American Montandon, Pat Montandon, you may know her as the founder of Children as the Peacemakers, who she was visiting the Soviet Union and China. She just passed away last week. However, she was a big force in the later days of perestroika, glasnost, and her efforts towards peace were, I think, one of those cultural things that it was worth having at the time because it needed to be said. And it was worth, I think it was worth the effort. And she delivered a lot of food aid and various other projects as well. But she brought the children together from both countries, which I really think was noble.
Important. Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah.
But let us move to the historical dimension of our discussion tonight. And what really first drew your attention to Charles-Henri-Gabriel, and why did his story stand out among the other historical actors that you were looking at in Crimea, Odessa?
Yeah. Now, that's, as I say, everything when it comes to Russian history is a coincidence. So I also came across Charles-Henri by coincidence. That was because I was studying the Dutch commercial network in Odessa, how it was preparing for the first sailing ships from the Netherlands, because the Netherlands had gained entry to the Black Sea only in 1820. So I was studying the situation in Odessa around 1820, in the 1820s. And then I came across the correspondence of Edouard Marigny, and he was a kind of commercial agent for the Dutch first on Crimea, in Theodosia, and then from 1826 in Odessa. And I was checking his information about the network, so what was going on in the network and how the network was preparing for these Dutch sailing ships. And then he was writing about southern Dutch, southern Netherlands, Belgium company de la Mer Noire. So some merchants from Antwerp intended to make some kind of trading house in Odessa, and the Dutch ambassador in Constantinople had asked him, send him some information and asked him for more information. And then he started searching for what was known about this company, how this was preparing, and then I came across Montandon. So at first in a very strange context, because I knew that Thibaut Marigny had been kind of consul for the southern Black Sea coast for the Netherlands in 1824. So I always, my guess was that, well, that he had some kind of official position. And then he wrote that he had heard about Charles-Henri, and that he said that he was intended to be the consul in Odessa, and that he considered him to be a rival of his. So that came to me as a big surprise. So then I realized that my assumptions about the diplomatic network of the Dutch on the northern Black Sea coast was not right. And then, so that was one. Then first he said, yeah, it's for me very difficult to report independently on this person because I see this person as a rival. And then he tried to give some objective information. Objective information is, yes, he's some kind of trader, he's from Swiss origin, so he is a citizen of Odessa, but formerly a Swiss citizen. So that also was a bit strange for me. And that he had many contacts, especially in the Anglo-Saxon world, and that he intended to, erect some steam, steam mills in Odessa. Mm-hmm. So that was the objective information. But obviously that was not what the consul wanted to hear. The consul wanted, of the ambassador, he wanted to hear more. And then in the next letter, he gave some not so very objective information. And then he related all kinds of gossip. So there was that the reputation of Montandon was very bad, that he treated his commercial relations very bad, that there were all kinds of horrific stories about him. So histoire affreuse is what he called them. So I wondered what could these histoires be. But nevertheless, I noticed something was with this Montandon. So that was first thing I heard about Charles-Henri. And later, I was looking in other parts of the archive, and then suddenly I found that there were some letters from Montandon in another archive. So I went to have a look at these, and these letters were in the archive concerning the application or the position for consul in Odessa. And I saw that there had been that there was put a vacation. A vacancy in 1824, that he obviously had applied for it, that the Dutch ambassador in St. Petersburg was in favor of him. So I don't, then raised for me the question, how did these two know each other? Mm-hmm. So first there was a letter that he was in favor of him, but then it was also clear that there was another contestant for the vacancy, a Jewish person, Jacob Nathanson. And Nathanson later appeared to be the father-in-law of Sigmund Freud. So there's also an interesting person. And then the Dutch ambassador in St. Petersburg was a bit cautious because Nathanson was a Jew and he didn't dare to propose a Jew for a consular post, although he was much better qualified than Charles-Henri. Because Nathanson was a banker in Odessa for a long time, had a good reputation, a large network. So actually, when we would have to choose now, we would choose for Nathanson. Nevertheless, a few months later, the ambassador in St. Petersburg had decided in favor of Montandon. But because this obviously was a decision he couldn't make on his own, or he was not the only person to advise the Dutch Minister of Foreign Affairs in Brussels at the time, he also had to wait for the advice of his colleague in Constantinople. And that is where tabou de Marigny comes in, because at that time, so when the vacancy was placed, there was no ambassador yet in Constantinople. He only arrived in the beginning of 1826. So when he arrived, he checked with tabou de Marigny. So actually, the questions about Montandon were twofold. One, what were his relations to this Compagnie de la Mer Noire? And the other was his suitability for this post of consul. But at that time, somehow the decision already had been made. So then we're talking about the middle of 1826. And then at the end of 1826, so this is the third letter of tabou de Marigny about Montandon, then he suddenly relates that there have been complaints about Charles-Henri, that he has gotten house arrest, and that he has only gotten house arrest, what is it, out of pity for his wife. And so he wasn't thrown plainly in jail, but only was confined to his home. And it was because an English and an American contact of him had complained about him or filed complaints that way. But then 2 months later, Tabou related that Montandon had been thrown in jail because his relations from Moscow also had complained about him. So obviously, when there are Russian merchants concerned, then there is no leniency. So then he disappeared in jail. And then half a year later, Tabou says that Montandon has gone bankrupt. So for me, that was the conclusion that was the end, at least, of this whole procedure for this vacancy of a consul. So he was intended to be the consul, but this was never actually effectuated. Because this search or this investigation first into his reputation, and then this delay because of the consul in the post of consul in Constantinople. So that is first time, or the superficial impression I got from Montandon. But then also Tabou de Marigny says that he also had been gathering information for this Compagnie de la Mer Noire. Mm-hmm. And that also was for me interesting because I only had read, came across this company in, English travel report from Edward Morton, and I had no idea what this was about. So I asked colleagues in Antwerp, and they didn't know, and nobody could tell me where the archives were. So I went to the archive and found the archives of this company in The Hague. So then I started investigating this company. And then for me also the question, what could have been the relation of Charles-Henri with this company? And because Montandon said, or Tabou said, that Montandon had been looking for information for this company, that he also had been talking to agents of this company in St. Petersburg. So he had been to St. Petersburg and talking about the company. And that he also said this whole company, this will not work. And that is also because Montandon has done it his way, and everything Montandon does will fail because he's very sloppy in his contacts. So for me, the question is, was that true? And then I started looking into Russian sources. And then I came across, first Vladimir Orechov. He referred me to the book of Gubar, the article of Gubar. I found the article of Gubar in his collection of articles. And there he refers to Montandon, that he had been in Odessa and that he had been recognized as a merchant of the Second Guild. That his wife also had gotten the right to exploit 3 shops. That he had invested some, I think, 20,000 rubles. And I also came across a remark that he somehow had bought a magazine for this company of the Black Sea. So that was for me very interesting because it proved that Montandon was not only talking about this company, but actually was involved and that he was already preparing the coming of this company to Odessa. Mm-hmm. So that's everything I knew about Montandon. And then my interest was raised in Montandon. Who is this person? Where did he come from? And that had to do with a third point of investigation for me. I'm also looking to persons from the Netherlands who have moved to Odessa and have become successful, have been entrepreneurs. So one of this person I also tried to write an article about. And he was a kind of adventurer. And I got the impression that Montandon also was an adventurer. And then I tried to find the background of Montandon to look whether his would be the same as that from Abraham Pauw. Abraham Pauw is this other person I investigated. And I tried to make a kind of profile of the persons who came to Odessa in the first years and who came especially from so-called small nations, like the Dutch Republic at the time, Switzerland, which was more or less the same way disorganized as the Netherlands were in Napoleonic time. And that's when I became interested in his the history before he came to Odessa, and then I contacted you. So that is
This is incredible. This is incredible, and actually, meeting you basically gave me goosebumps because when saw the level of research that you had done and the types of documents that you had unearthed, I was just amazed. Especially this consulship and the information that you pulled to light was just incredible. But this is an interesting figure because he's so elusive. And even if we start to probe his origins, this is quite difficult because the main source for Montandon family history, Les Montandons by Frederick Jules Montandon. It is 600 years of family history. And I scoured the entire manual looking for who could be this Charles-Henri-Gabriel. And there was no candidate. In fact, he is in the book, but he is not named. There is a place under the genealogical branch Montandon Jacques, and this is we see Gabriel Montandon. This is his grandfather, and Charles Frederick Montandon. Now, Charles Frederick Montandon, his father, it lists that he has 3 sons. The first son is not named, and this is quite interesting. And there's also no birth year for this. So I started to probe this individual, and I did find that now the godfather is named for this son. And when I looked to see when he was married with his wife was Henriette Tissot d'Aguet. Now they seem to have been married in 1792, and the next son was born in 1795. So therefore, and he is the oldest son. It's this son with the no name. This must be him, somewhere between 1792 and 1795. Now, I say 1795 because one idiosyncrasy in the Montandon family genealogy is a plethora of twins. And I actually am myself a twin. And my father, his father also gave birth to twins. So, and it goes, one of the other families that are close cousins of ours have 3 pairs of twins. So, but looking at the family history, I see this Charles Frederick, and I'm researching, and I it does say in this Les Montandons, now the oldest or the youngest son rather. This is so the middle son would have been Ami Constant, and he was born in 1795, and then in 1806 the last son Louis Auguste, and he went by Louis. So when Louis Auguste died, he left 3 paintings by the very famous Swiss painter. This is Robert, Léopold Robert, and it mentions that these were willed to the Museum of Les Beaux-Arts in Chaux-de-Fonds in 1880 after his death. So this is very fortunate because we know right away that these are Charles Frederick and his wife. There is a father, there's the mother, and there is one of the children. And in reading the account of Léopold Robert, we find in his writings I believe these are his memoirs. And I can actually read this verbatim, but he mentions encountering a Charles-Henri Montandon. So he was in Paris, and this was June 14th, 1815. And I will quote him directly. I do not know what fortunate chance caused me to head more towards the Tuileries than to the Champ de Mars. For I had not known that I would see the procession there. So there was a cortege of Napoleonic forces going to Waterloo, and so that I would see the procession there, and that I would meet Charles-Henri Montandon, with whom I spent the whole day, which I am pleased about. For without him and his boldness, and this is interesting because he's talking about his character, and his boldness, I would not have been on the platform from which the emperor delivered a speech to the troops, a speech which we hear word for word without missing a single syllable. So somehow this Charles-Henri was able to get a position on the platform with Napoleon as he addressed the troops going to the last battle, to Waterloo. And this is quite fascinating. But this links Léopold Robert and Charles-Henri-Gabriel Montandon. And therefore, there's enough information to conclude that this painting is the first son, the eldest son, with whom he was acquainted. Now, it couldn't have been Louis Auguste for sure. There would have been an age difference. The museum itself dates these between 1817 and 1819. And it does appear that this is his friend. And it's quite interesting because now by the 1820s, he's going to be disappearing more or less from Western European documentation. That we will not see him. Now might be a good time to look at the early timeline for him. So this is, we believe that he was born, and he's a slipper character. We do not know when he was born exactly. We do not know when he died. But 1792 to 1794 or 5, he was born. Now, he was probably, I'm guessing, probably 1793 or 94. Now, Robert, the painter, Leopold was born, I believe, in 1793 or 4 also. They probably were classmates from La Chaux-de-Fonds. And so when he saw his old friend in Paris, this was a great occasion. And these were exactly the years that he was in Paris doing his understudy. But we have his brother born in 1795, this Ami Constant, and we don't have very much information about him. We don't really know what he did for a living. Now, there are documentary evidence, letters in the Swiss archives from 1797 and 1799, which show his father, Charles Frederick, and a other close relative. This is probably Jean-Henri Montandon, who was a really talented watch and clockmaker. But they were involved in basically selling clocks, watches, watch parts, etc. So we see these letters, and we see where they were living at the time. And by 1813, the next reference we have is a supposed membership to the a Masonic lodge, the Lodge of Incorruptible Friends of, I believe this is St. Luke. Now, this is interesting because Charles-Henri Montandon was a Freemason, and they record him as having received the 3rd degree, which is a Master Mason. Now, this does sound like a bit of a leap of faith. When I did actually ask the AI what it thought, and it claimed that you could attain this within 3 months to a year. I'm not exactly sure how realistic this is, but at any rate, this is a Masonic lodge, these Incorruptible Friends, which was of St. Luke. which is favored by artisans, painters, sculptors, and engravers. So I almost wonder if this would be true. Did he have some sort of an engraving background? Did he start in the watch business in something along these varieties before he went on to selling watch parts and watches? Because we do find him in 1820 in the French almanac listed CHG Montandon, and he has a depot of horological products for the USA. And now the father, Charles Frederick, was a courtier en horlogerie, so he was exactly this merchant, basically selling watch parts and watches, etc. So it's not a far fetch to see that they were trading, and likely with America. Now, Charles Frederick's brother was a watchmaker too. This is Victor Francois Emmanuel. I believe he went by Francois. And it's interesting because Francois appears to have been in Brussels. And actually in 1820-21. And this is, we find him at a wedding of a Charles, or rather Henry Louis Chatelain. He is a witness at this wedding. But this is quite fascinating because we have this Belgium connection with the family. And now the youngest brother, Louis Auguste, was married in Mons, Belgium in 1826. Now, this is exactly the same period, 1815 to 1830, when Belgium and Netherlands were one country. So I also believe, but I have not found any documentary evidence if Charles-Henri was also in Belgium or what he was doing. Was he located there for business? Or could you tell us anything about, do you have any idea about his possibility of being in Belgium or the Low Countries, Netherlands?
Now, for me, this is very difficult. So I found this letter when he was writing for this vacancy to the Dutch ambassador in St. Petersburg. And there he said that he just had returned to Odessa from a trip to England, which had taken 6 weeks. So that it was at the end of 1824, he had been in England. So it wouldn't be improbable that he had been in the Netherlands before. So when going to that he shipped, for instance, from Rotterdam to England, could be. But he also refers to this vacancy for consul, and then he offers the consul or the ambassador to go to the Netherlands to fetch instructions in case he would be appointed as a consul. So that, for me, proves that he hadn't been in the Netherlands for this vacancy, and that he had not applied for this vacancy in the Netherlands. So probably he had heard about this vacancy when in St. Petersburg, and that he had been in St. Petersburg maybe with these Belgian contacts who were trying to establish this company. And so that he was somehow moving in this network of Dutch ambassador and Dutch merchants in St. Petersburg. And that was the place that he heard from this vacancy. And that is why he contacted Van Heekeren, this Dutch ambassador. So he would have gone to the Netherlands when the vacancy, or I suppose as consul, would have been effectuated. So I have no proof that he had been in the Netherlands during this procedure. But nevertheless, he was in the Dutch network. He somehow was in the picture for Dutch consul. So it would be probable that he would also have contacts in the Netherlands. But probably these contacts would be related to his contacts or his business in England. But how this is, I don't know. I haven't seen any direct references to it. So I don't know more than these weeks in England, this reference to this instruction, and the probability that he had been in St. Petersburg also, because Taboo refers to his being in St. Petersburg somewhere in 1825 in relation to this Belgian company.
It's interesting that the other close family members, at least one brother, was married in Mons in 1826, and that this uncle, his father's brother, seems to have been there. Now, that same father, this Francois Montandon, now one of his sons was watchmaker Eugène, and it appears that this is the individual that we find in New Orleans. And he died in a hospital in 1832 there. However, I found him in articles as far back as 1829. I suspect he was there much before then, but I also speculate whether this relative was assisting in importing watch goods and products from this business that they established in 1820, which doesn't seem to have lasted very long. It's only in one French almanac, this Almanac de Commerce from 1820, and then we don't see his address. But apparently he was moving around quite a lot during this period, and there are early reports that he may have been in Russia as early as 1817, but certainly he is in Odessa, I believe, is at 1824. When we look at the timeline, but yeah, there is a mention of him actually in 1821 of arriving in the spring, and he's supposedly reported to visit a Masonic lodge, the Pont Euxine à l'Or d'Odessa. So once again, there are orthographic issues, but it is interesting that the three letters of his, basically they have K, X, G, or that could be C, H, G, basically transliterated. But there is this question. But once again, we have this interesting liaison with these Masonic lodges, and whether he does seem to have been an operator, that he was moving in circles, that somehow he manages to get on the same platform with Napoleon right before the Battle of Waterloo. And now Francois, this uncle, was actually a wedding guest of a soldier who was born in 1789, but he was working in a watchmaking shop in Brussels, and he was marrying a lady, but this individual was a veteran of the Imperial Guard that was at Waterloo, and he was actually in the 100 days. So I also wonder if there's some sort of a connection with that individual, this Henri Louis Chatelain.
No, I wouldn't know because this is outside Russia.
Yeah. It's speculative at this point. These are speculative associations, naturally, but I did want to go back to some of the questions that we had with regard. So we really don't know what he was doing in England. This Charles-Henri. There is an idea that he was looking for partners with steam engine technology for Odessa.
Yeah. That at least is what Tabou de Marigny seems sure about. He also writes that Montandon is a man full of projects. So he was very, entrepreneurial, had all kinds of ideas of with his business opportunities. So steam engines will be one of them, and of course that was the period that the Industrial Revolution had started in England with steam energy. So it would be reasonable to expect that the contacts in England would have been around this steam mill idea. So gossip, but exactly what kind of steam mills he intended to make, I don't know. So that is something I would have checked further in the industrial development of Odessa.
one interesting, also, we talked previously about these possible money troubles and the bankruptcies, etc. Now, there is an article in the Swiss press from 1823, and this is apparently he had already left the scene, but his brothers were involved in this article where they specifically reject debts and goods of both parents and of the grandfather, Gabriel, who he had been an innkeeper. But so it almost seems that these horological ventures for in America and other possible projects just didn't pan out, and the children now, since Charles Henry was out of the country, the debts fell to them, and they were rejecting them in 1823.
But for me, the question is, you say there were two rejecting. So besides Louis Auguste, who was the other one?
So this is Ami Constant, and this was the other son that was born in 1795. And they both it basically both refused from any goods or debts of the parents, and so they apparently they must have been somehow unpaid, left unpaid, and these were their creditors were probably seeking some sort of payment back. But I also wanted to bring back to the since this Charles Henri is so murky, one of the other evidences that I see him as he must be this individual is that his father's name was Charles, his mother's name was Henriette, and his grandfather's name was Gabriel, and therefore he appears to have one name. And Gabriel is a very rare name in the Montandon family, and indeed in French naming, it's totally not common. So it does seem logical that the child was named in honor of each of these individuals.
But when I see the signature on the letters, so the letters I found, he signs with Charles-Henri and not with Gabriel, so only two names.
I have.
I also remarks that he changes his names. And so the question, so he says he's known as Auguste in England, but here he names himself Charles. And so the question also, and also he appears to have taken the name of his supposed wife, Dorianten, also as kind of extra name. So the letters you find in the Dutch archive are filed under the name of Montandon Dorianten. So you think it's some person of some what is it, an aristocrat. And so that's also he's playing with the name, with his names and his identity.
So it also occurs to me that this, just to give the benefit of the doubt, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I'm wondering if the youngest brother, Louis Auguste, now it was sent because this is sort of a family-operated business in these back in the day. I see this with these other watchmakers that for example, a business Henri Montandon in Besançon, and it's continued under this name, but Henri Edward is continuing Henri Louis. It seems to me that there may be a possibility that this is almost a family enterprise, almost in this établissage sort of cottage industry style. And whereas different individuals are doing different roles, helping out towards the same goal, that this is perhaps a slight possibility, but not guaranteed. He may have been obfuscating his identity on purpose, like you said.
Yeah, I think so, but that's also because, I guess that identity and playing with identity was more common in this period than it is now. And also because Odessa was a rather wild city, because it was new and all kinds of adventures. And so it wasn't as Russian as we know it half a century later. Also, what I understand it is Italian was the language that was spoken in Odessa at the time. So that foreigners formed the majority at that moment. And all kinds of, what I say, adventurers at this. So it's only under Richelieu, so between 1804 and 1814. Then some order started to arise in this city, so it became more regulated, and it also took some time because before it was a completely civilized city, so to say. So I think Montandon and also this other person I'm investigating, they were in Odessa at a more or less wild period, and that's also what Orekov wrote to me about the cultural atmosphere at the time. And so it was a small world where a person like Vorontsov, the later governor, was easy to approach. So it was a small city with all kinds of people trying to make money. And one could make money fast, and then one could lose it fast. And also I think that also when it comes to law enforcing, probably the opportunities were not very large at the time. So maybe this game with identities also belongs to the culture of Odessa at the time, but I'm not sure. But nevertheless, it was a very playful period in which everything was possible, I think.
And it's very interesting, this naming confusion, because we, at the same time, the exact same time in Paris, between 1819 and 1821, we have a namesake, another Charles-Henri Montandon, living only a few blocks away from this depot that CHG Montandon is listed under. And that one was also involved in maritime companies, shipping to America. And indeed, there was he was associated with an F. Brunel, and they seem to have had some sort of publication, Courrier des États-Unis, which they were offering. I believe it was it 25 francs for subscription. But anyways, I am wondering, in such a small area, very compacted, how two individuals with the same name, which very uncommon indeed, but could be so close and not know each other, and also be in the same line of work and not know each other, existed. That Charles-Henri Gabriel would certainly have seen this publication and seen the name, and indeed this was a relative. And when I found the identity of the second Charles-Henri, his parents are apparently the mayor of La Brevine. But when I look at the Les Montandons book of the genealogical information, it does not go through. Yet the Paris archives show that this individual was born in 1777 and he died in 1840, and he was also Swiss born. So we have this sort of confusion of, and he was hiring ships that went to St. Petersburg as well, Baltic traffic with Prussian vessels. Neuchâtel was a possession of the King of Prussia during the post-Napoleonic and pre-Napoleonic period. It's very interesting that we have two individuals sort of almost overlapping in what they're doing.
For me, the question is how certain are you that it's two persons? So how certain are you about this identity of this second Charles-Henri without Gabriel?
It's interesting. It's there's always a factor that it could be the same person. Yet this person was located at Riche number 22, and his sister was also living at this address. And just on the other side of the street is this Passage Saunier number 12, and this is where this F. Brunel, this was living. But their periodical was offered from Brunel's location, but the company was Montandon and F. Brunel and Co. So it seems like it is related to this other mysterious Charles-Henri, but there once again there's not enough information really to make a definitive conclusion, but it does seem like, since they're right across the street from each other, and Charles-Henri-Gabriel is several blocks away from them.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure as well. So
it's a question mark.
Yes, what comes to mind is this scandal around Charles-Henri with Gabriel in Odessa when he started an affair with the wife of Dr. Lane. That's a German doctor in Odessa. Charles-Henri started a relationship with her probably somewhere in 1829, 1830. And then later, when she had divorced her husband and lived together with Charles-Henri, the husband wrote an angry letter in which he defamated Charles-Henri and was referring to his registration as a merchant with a Parisian whore, as he writes, Parisian prostitute. So I discussed this with Vladimir Rachov, and he told me so. Not sure if it was a prostitute, could be a courtesan, because it was more or less usual. So many men had lovers, also Vorontsov. So it's not of having love or of amorous relationships. You only should not be too public about it. So for me, this is also such a story. So who was this woman he was with? He was presenting her as his wife. He was playing with her name. He was adding her name to his name.
This is Henriette, right? Was her so-called Henriette?
No, he was playing with her family name, so adding her family, Dorionte, to his name. Whether she was called Dorionte and what was her first name, I haven't traced her, so to say. Only in these letters he wrote or he signed to the Dutch ambassador. So for me the question is, what kind of game was this? Yes, so was he married to this woman? Was this woman only presented to the bureaucrats to obtain this license to exploit shops in Odessa? And then she disappeared, according to the gossip of this Dr. Lange. Montandon went bankrupt and was saved by an Italian friend in exchange for his wife, which suggests that his wife he wasn't really married to her, and that she might also be a courtesan or a prostitute or a woman of not so well repute, so to say. But some also question marks and playing with identities and with women. So could it not have been that something like this was going on in Paris as well, and that he needed two identities for different jobs as a kind of measure or business idea, so that when he would go bankrupt in the one, that he still would have the other? I don't know.
This is a very
identity problem, and also with the woman. So first in Paris, then later in Odessa. So yeah,
it's a very murky period. This middle 1820s up until 1829, it seems to be very murky. And by 1830, he seems to be traveling around Crimea at this point and researching for this book, which he submitted in 1833 to the censor, but published in 1834 after it apparently was approved. And this is interesting because one of his big fans was Tsar Nicholas I, who, when he was visiting in 1837, had an audience with Charles-Henri, or Charles-Henri, I should say, had an audience with him. As I understood that the Tsar wanted to discuss finer points with the book and make corrections.
Okay.
Yeah, so, which is the royal prerogative, I think.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that by 1837, and so we have all these what appear to be business failures during the 1820s, and then he writes this book, and it's much talked about in Western Europe. I have found it mentioned in Central European publications, but he seems to go quiet after, by say 1839, 1841. We don't know really what happened. Do you know what became of him? What was his fate?
No. For me, when it comes, I'm only researching the period until 1830 because that is the end of this Compagnie de la Mer Noire. And also the end of the United Dutch Kingdom, so to say. So after 1830 is not my what is it
Focus.
my research. So that's so I
Because
would refer to Vladimir Roykov for this part because he has been investigating Montandon for the Russian translation of the guide, and he has information from Montandon when he came to Crimea.
Mhm.
So he also wrote to me, he said that he had been on Crimea longer than was assumed. So first, the idea was that he would have this relationship, started this relationship with wife of Lange somewhere in 1832. He says that was earlier. So it could be because we have this, what is it, this note that he was on the first steamboat from Odessa to Crimea in 1828. So probably that might have been the moment that he went to Crimea, that he stayed on Crimea, that he then started his relationship with Lange, and that this was also the period that he did the work for the guide. For this, you should ask Reichhoff, because he knows everything about this, because this is also in the introduction of his translation of the guide.
Now, I understand that while he was still in Odessa, and this would have been circa 1827, this is prior to his Crimean wanderings, that he appears to have had contact with the poet Alexander Pushkin, and that there are some dedications involving Pushkin. So that this is rather interesting. Once again, perhaps this is his boldness coming out, that he was having. Of course, the cultural circles in Odessa would have been quite small, and it would have been very plausible that the two could have met, especially if at that time he had the favor of Count Vorontsov.
That for me is something. And so when I read the dedication, it's not clear that he has met Pushkin in person. He refers to having stolen something from him, and that he's now compensating for the theft. But what he seems to have stolen is a quotation from the fountain of Bakshishahasa, the poem by Pushkin. So for me, it's a kind of marketing trick. So that he tries to make himself big over Pushkin, and that has worked because there is this reference to Pushkin. He still attracts attention over Russia because he has met Pushkin, and Pushkin is kind of god in Russia. Yes, I'm not sure. So first, I think the dedication is a marketing trick. But nevertheless, the chance that he would have met Pushkin while Pushkin was in Odessa, I think it was between August 23 and July 1824, that he would have met Pushkin will be very big because they were going on in the same, or they were attending the same circles. Vorontsov's wife held her soirees, and it's very probable that Montandon visited these soirees as well. Pushkin having his affair with the wife of Vorontsov. So I think it's very probable, but there is no proof.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about this character is the mystery. I think it's raising the questions and trying to find an answer. And this can be a real stickler because we want to be as careful as possible when we come to some sort of a conclusion that it is based on fact, and that their supposition can be very tricky. We shouldn't suppose, but it is so tempting in his case. There are so many issues floating around him that, but it's a very good point. I do think that you're probably right that he is probably apologizing for plagiarism in this case.
I don't know, it's not too much plagiarism. It's also normally, as historians, we also copy lots of work of others and then we put in a footnote. I think this is some kind of, what Montandon did more or less is the same. So that he put his quotation, I think, at the beginning of the guide, and then by way of, he said, thank you, Pushkin, for these nice lines you have invented and written, because they're a nice introduction to my guide to Crimea. And at the same time, he uses Pushkin as a kind of advertisement for his guide, which works. But nevertheless, I think that about Montandon, we have to miss a lot, but nevertheless, we have a lot of interesting facts. So that is, we have lots of marking points when it comes to facts from the archives, especially what I found, at least for the Dutch connections in the Dutch archives, there was more than I expected. And they are more or less hard facts. Also, I think, in the archive in Odessa, so this reference to this storage house he has found is what is it? The acknowledgement or the that he was taken in as merchant of the second guild, and so these are interesting facts on their own. And then it's always historians always have to do with blank spots. Call them with your fantasy. Only that what we fill in with our fantasy should be probable. So we know from the context. What we say that it's probably, even though we don't have proof, chances that we actually would have met Pushkin is big, because they were at the same time in the same city, they were frequenting the same circles, they had the same contacts, so chance would be small that they would not have met. And also notice from Montandon, he was also kind of extrovert type. So he wasn't shy, so also a reason to expect that, there's an interesting person, I go and meet this person. So investigating Pau is much more modest. So I have a reference from Taboo that Pau also frequented these circles, but that he wasn't liked in these circles because he took distance from the circles. It's also possible to frequent the same circles but have a different reputation. It's probable that Montandon actually met Pushkin.
I think that it does appear that this character is very likable when you meet him, but then later, if you have business dealings, perhaps beware. But I do think he was likable, very bold. I think he seems to have been really aiming high wherever he went, and he does seem to exhibit these characteristics of boldness, and he's a real adventurer. He started out in watchmaking. The trade as a merchant. I don't think he was a trained watchmaker per se. He may have had a discipline under watchmaking, like engraving or something of this variety, but he was a merchant and a businessman, and then he went on to bigger projects. But he certainly has this adventurer type when you see his life, and it seems to have been a short one.
Yeah. So if not back to that, I think this is a nice summing up of what we know about him and what we think we know about him.
I think there are as many open questions as there are of solid facts, Tim. It's almost an even split. But
nevertheless, for me it's interesting because first I came across these remarks of Taboo, and I thought it was gossip. And then later I noticed that some of it wasn't gossip. For instance, his position of consul, his good reputation, at least in St. Petersburg, with the Dutch ambassador. So that also makes it interesting. So he's not as what is it? Yeah, murky. It's what is it? Somehow we have enough markers to more or less get to know him. And that it's not only gossip or vague rumors. So that is for me, it was for me a bit of surprise because I found more than I expected, and it was more factual than I expected. And also when it came to his reputation in St. Petersburg, I now know that the ambassador was very careful with his dealings. So these two Belgian merchants, Montandon is supposed to have worked for, when they first came to St. Petersburg at the end of 1823, Van Heekeren, so the ambassador, also investigated their characters. So Van Heekeren had the tradition of investigating and checking the reputations before he would refer the persons to his contacts. So that he was positive about Montandon must prove that at least in St. Petersburg he had reputation. And that also nuances again the impressions Taboo had. So probably Taboo had different information from Odessa and extrapolated them to St. Petersburg. But when it came to St. Petersburg, he wasn't right. And so it also makes it more complex.
This feels like an ancient equivalent of doverei no proverei.
Yeah. So yeah. That would be a nice ending to it.
Hey, I just want to thank you for this excellent interview. You've been very helpful in bringing this story to light, and I look forward to assisting you with anything in the future. And let us definitely keep in touch. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your interest in my project as well. And I hope to be of assistance to you in the other way around.
Yes, thank you very much. It was it was a pleasure to do it, and also like to keep in touch. So that when I have questions and when my articles are ready, I also will show them to you so you can comment on them and correct when necessary. And we'll see what new surprises the archives will deliver.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you so much, Ad. A biento.
Okay. Over.
Bye.